We're live. Say hello.
How's it going, everybody?
And now
Good to see you, Alex.
Good to see you too, Dev.
Thanks for coming up, man.
All right, I had to warn Dev. I come out with a lot of energy. I'm going to have to raise his chair a little bit. Good morning, everybody. My name is Alex Vidal. I am president of Related ISG International Realty and host of the show you're watching today, episode number 51 of The Closer Club. If you hear my voice break in and out, I was just telling Dev, we had 8 soccer games between my twins being on one team and my 12-year-old on another. They both made it to the finals. We walked away with a championship trophy, an MVP trophy, and I lost my voice, so kind of hard to do these interviews without a voice, but here we go.
Yeah, it was good for a good cause for the kids.
It was a great cause. Again, Dev, thank you so much.
Yeah.
You guys know the drill. After 51 episodes, we have 9 questions for Dev. What I love about today's episode is it will be 100% about Fort Lauderdale, the very first one that we do that's only about Fort Lauderdale. So let's get it going.
Let's do it.
Now, Dev plays a lot of roles. Dev, you serve as president and CEO of Merrimac Ventures, which is currently developing the Gale in Fort Lauderdale and the Four Seasons in Fort Lauderdale, just to name a few. You're the founder and partner of Ramesh Properties and Shift Hand Residential. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Chieftain.
Yeah.
You are heavily involved in the Fort Lauderdale Air and Sea Show, which is this weekend. Some people may even call you the king of Fort Lauderdale. So tell us a little bit about your path to where we are today.
Sure. Well, that would be the wrong moniker. I would say some people call my mom the queen of Fort Lauderdale.
Fair enough.
That would probably be fair. I just work for the queen. But we grew up here in Fort Lauderdale, moved here in the mid-'80s. Parents bought a little motel called the Merrimac. So that's where Merrimac Ventures comes from. And we lived in the motel. We operated it. Very interesting time being in Fort Lauderdale, mid-'80s, at a motel on the beach during the spring break heydays. But over time, the city changed, kicked out the spring break, and wanted to be a little bit more of a mature town, or I should say went from a town to a city. And so our business has evolved along with the community. So we started off running little motels. As you mentioned, we're now building the Four Seasons, but also a Hilton Hotel, the Gale, which is a boutique hotel. So the business has grown over the last 3 decades, and my mom was running it with my father. He passed away early. She took over the helm. My brother Nitin, who you've had on the show, he came, moved here, was running it with her, and then he moved to Miami, obviously to oversee Miami World Center, and I came back from New York to run the business. So.
Now, you went to New York. What were you doing in New York? And if you can share with the audience, because I read up your resume about your education. And for a guy who had a son at 19 and started working full time and had maybe half a year of college, I was blown away by your college resume.
Yeah, thanks. I went to Duke undergrad, just like my brother. Although I was a fan before he was, he's just older. So we got there. I like to point that out. Went to Duke. And
no brotherly competition at all.
It wasn't it wasn't a glamorous upbringing. Growing up in the motels, being here, we didn't really understand the long-term vision. So we both decided we didn't want to come back here and do that. We wanted to go to New York, work on Wall Street. I worked at Credit Suisse, so I was doing structured derivatives, covering hedge funds, and I thought that that would be exciting and obviously lucrative. And after a few years, I just kind of realized I wanted something more entrepreneurial, wanted to be outside, I wanted to be making things happen, and it just felt confined on a trading floor. So. At that time, the business was transitioning. My mom called my brother and I one day and said, "Hey, I'm coming up to New York next week. Can you guys get off for lunch?" We said, "No, Mom, we work on trading floors." He was at Goldman. I was like, "We don't get lunch breaks." She said, "Oh, okay. Well, I have a lunch with Donald Trump. I thought you might want to join." and so that's a whole other story. But here's our mom from Fort Lauderdale running the business, now putting together our first big deal, which was at the time the Trump International. It's now the Conrad. 300-unit condo hotel, kind of all of our own, and that's when we realized there's more to the family business. We started to understand the real estate side as opposed to the hotel operation side, and so then he moved home, and then I moved home. We both stopped at Columbia, did the real estate master's program there.
Now, did you make the lunch?
What's that?
Did you make that lunch?
We did. Yeah. We ended up. We did make it. Yeah, both of our bosses understood when we mentioned that.
Yeah.
For the record, this was pre-apprentice, obviously.
No, it doesn't matter.
So I'm not making any political statements here.
But you know what's interesting about that, Dev? It doesn't matter whether you're, and again, I'm not getting political at all, pro-Trump or anti-Trump. If anybody has an opportunity to have lunch with Donald Trump back then or today, they would be crazy not to take it. For their own motives, right?
Yeah. So it was cool.
Awesome. Now, you mentioned that you like to be out in the field a lot, and you are involved in developments, single-family home rentals, which was a surprise for me to know. The Wharf, Fort Lauderdale, which we confirmed yesterday, was with my buddy, Emmy Gale. We're going to have Emmy on the show in a few weeks because obviously the nightlife of Miami plays a large role of what makes South Florida that part of its secret sauce. You have a window company, the Air and Sea Show. What led you into each of those ventures, and more importantly, how do you handle it? Because for the realtors who watch this, they may have 5, 10, 20 deals going at once, and it's always that balancing act of how do you maintain what you got while trying to grow.
Sure.
So how did you get into it, and how do you manage it all?
Sure. So up until 2010, it was really just Merrimac Ventures, which is a family business. After we came through the recession, or the worst of the recession, I wanted to look at buying some new properties, so I started a real estate fund, that's Ramesh Properties, brought a couple high net worth investors in, and we kind of went on a buying spree from 2011 to 2014, and just bought up things like Las Olas Riverfront, our Pompano site, a bunch of other stuff. So I was running the family business and the fund had a lot of development properties, but no cash flow. So then we looked at different opportunities to build cash flow. So I created Chieftain Residential, and we went and bought single-family homes in Atlanta. So I used to fly up to Atlanta with a bag full of $5 to $10 million of cashier's checks. You had to have change, so I'd go to the bank and order, some 5s, which are 5,000s, 10s, 25s. Yeah, because you didn't get change on the courthouse steps.
Sure.
And I was there once a month, buying anywhere from 30 to 80 houses. We now have over 500 houses that we just refinanced.
Holy crap.
And they're fully stabilized.
All in Atlanta?
All, Metro Atlanta area. So that was a cash flow kind of business. So those are the real estate components. And the air show just kind of came up. It went away. It was a big thing in Fort Lauderdale for over a decade. Sure. Went away during the recession. A couple people tried to revive it. Some people came to us and said, "Why don't you get involved?" Through a coincidence, I met my current partner, who's in the air show business. So you ask how I do these other things, it's always with a partner that knows that business, but where we can add value. So we shook hands on a deal, and we brought the show back. This is now our 6th show. We've got the Blue Angels this year for the first time in over a decade, flying over Fort Lauderdale. So that's special to me because that event was not only cool growing up as being our signature event, but it was also important for our family business. And it's still important for a lot of the hotels on the beach to get that demand off season. So
and the restaurants too, right? That's got to be a huge spike in business.
Everybody, that's really why we did it. I mean, it's great. Kids come out. My nephews now, I got 3 boys. They love it. So it's fun to see all of that. But it was really, we just wanted to kind of give back to the beach community that did a lot for us and drive that business. Window company, just some friends of mine from high school. Coincidentally, we met, I ran into when I moved back. We got involved. I was helping them with some business. They had a partner that wanted to get out. They offered to let us buy in. I say us, my brother and I. And so bought part of the company. That was pre-recession, so we actually, we had to fight through the downturn. But, those tough times are what make you more successful in the good times. So.
Well, and it's interesting because during the downturn is when you also bought all this prime real estate, right? So
yeah,
there's opportunities.
There is. I mean, look, 08 to 10 wasn't pretty, but we learned a lot. I always say I moved home from New York in 2007, had my master's from Columbia, then I got my real education from 08 to 10, running the business and doing the day-to-day.
It's interesting. So nothing to do with this. How do you feel about today? And so he's not prepped for this at all, but it's been a major topic of conversation on social media today, which is all those celebrity entrepreneurs I was telling you about really are downplaying the value of a college education. And they say, don't go to college, you're going to learn exactly, kind of like what you said. How do you feel about that, by the way? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, I think it depends on the individual. If you have a passion for something, you know exactly what you want to do coming out of high school or even undergrad, then follow that passion. I mean, the tools are there to be successful with or without it. But for me, I didn't know what I wanted to do. It gave me great relationships, great exposure, and college is there to teach you not what to think, but how to think. Thinking creatively, and so I don't think there's one size fits all. If somebody's got a great idea out of school and they believe in it and they're passionate about it, then go for it. Having passion in what you do is probably the most important key to success. Yeah. So if you found that early, and you're confident in your idea or your business plan, then go for it. But I don't know that it's for everybody.
You know, it's funny. You said two things. That's what my wife says. Aside from the education, it's not so much they teaching you how to think, right? Different ways to think and be in that environment, and the relationships and the friendships that you form, and the partying and all that. That's a part of life. Right? Yeah. Now, and I mentioned this already. What I love about today's interview is that we're really going to focus all of it on Fort Lauderdale, and you kind of touched upon a little bit about your family's deep history here. Tell us a little bit more about how your family ended up here and why Fort Lauderdale versus maybe some of the other parts of the country, or even Florida.
Yeah, so I was born in St. Charles, Missouri, of all places. My dad went to business school, came from India, went to business school in the Midwest. We had family there, so we started a business there. We had some family that were running motels that were down here. He had an illness that the doctor said be better if he, being my father, better if you lived in a warmer climate. Okay. We used to come down here and visit. Seemed like a great place. We already had family here. So we bought a motel, the Merrimac, in 1986, okay. Right on A1A. He put his life savings, or my parents put their life savings, because my mom was always active in the business from day one. And they put their life savings in and bought the first property. And so that's how we ended up in Fort Lauderdale. But the interesting thing was, immediately after we bought, the city started the process of kicking out spring break. So the American dream, as we thought, we bought this property, we're on the ocean, we had a pool. I mean, how cool was that, right? You moved from the Midwest and now you're on the beach with the pool. It's a cool thing. But the American dream,
in the winter especially.
Well, yeah, exactly. We had a lot of old friends from there that come and visit. But the American dream quickly, turned into the American nightmare, because all of a sudden our business was gone. We didn't know we didn't know the market. So quickly, my father got very involved in the community. Got involved with the Chamber of Commerce, the Convention and Visitors Bureau, and the city decided that they wanted to redevelop the beach, and that they wanted to go for a more mature, affluent family demographic versus spring break. And so, like I said, our business just evolved into that over time. We were kids, so we didn't understand that long-term vision, but that was always there, and he was a big part of that conversation and that process. Back in the 80s and the early 90s. So,
do you remember that time?
Oh yeah. My first business was a lemonade stand on A1A, and but I'd sell lemonade to spring breakers that were stuck in traffic.
Sure.
Because A1A was jammed.
They were probably filling it with vodka.
Well, that's what I said. I said that to someone the other day. I said if I was a little more entrepreneurial, I probably would have sold added floaters. But I was 7 at the time, so I don't think my parents would have.
I would have been a customer for sure.
So yeah, it's a slightly different upbringing than most, but it was definitely unique, and I think taught me a lot of what's valuable today.
That's awesome. Well, let's get to Fort Lauderdale itself and what's happening in Fort Lauderdale today. What makes Fort Lauderdale so unique, in particular, if you were to compare it to the South Miami or to the Northwest Palm? And what's one thing that realtors should be including about Fort Lauderdale to their clients in their elevator pitch?
Yeah, the thing is people always try to compare them as their alternatives, and the reality is they're completely distinct markets. Okay. So we don't get a lot of people in Fort Lauderdale that are considering Miami or Fort Lauderdale. Usually they find an affinity towards one or the other. We get a lot of people that are in Miami that love it for a period of time, but then they want something that maybe is a little less intense, less traffic, less congestion. They love the waterways, and so they kind of mature into Fort Lauderdale. But I always say Miami's our best amenity. We want it nearby, especially with the addition of Brightline. Now you don't have to drive. You can take the train or you take an Uber, so it's even better now. But it's not. They're not alternatives. And again, Palm Beach is distinctive as well. It tends to be a little bit older, even more sleepy. So my friends in Palm Beach, they go to the same 3 or 4 places. In Fort Lauderdale, we go to the same 8 to 10 places, and in Miami, you've got 800 places to count. So, so they're different. I like being in Fort Lauderdale because I'm 5 minutes from everything. I'm 5 minutes from the airport. I'm 5 minutes from the beach. I'm 5 minutes from the downtown. So it's very convenient to live here. I don't have to spend a lot of time in traffic. But as I mentioned earlier, I've got a place down in Miami, and I do appreciate that. Having lived in New York, I like that city life, that intensive. I just don't want it on a daily basis. So Fort Lauderdale is definitely a different demographic. I'd say as you mature, you kind of move up the coast, right? So Miami is the younger party crowd, and then Fort Lauderdale, you have kids, you still like to go out, still want to have good options for food and beverage restaurants. but you want a little bit of maybe a little bit quieter pace. So Fort Lauderdale's great for that. Then the kids are gone and you're a little bit older and you want something even quieter. Sure. You move north to Palm Beach. Yeah. So that's not a perfect analogy, but it's I think it gives you a general sense.
Now, do you see that? How do you see it? And again, this is not on here, but one of the things I love is the boom of rentals that are coming into. I mean, what you're doing with PMG on the river, and then along in Fat Village, there's a ton of rentals going on. How do you see that playing into how Fort Lauderdale is going to shape up? Is that the next generation that's going to be moving into these luxury condos on the beach?
Look, I think we're selling at over $1,600 a foot at the Four Seasons, so I don't know that they're going from a rental to a
congrats, man,
to a Four Seasons. But the best part is that proves the rental market proves that Fort Lauderdale has become a true live, work, play environment, a true city, because we have all these great food and beverage options, this nightlife. And I said 8 to 10. We have a lot more than that. Yeah. We just become a creature of habit and frequent 8 to 10. But there's tons of options. And so Fort Lauderdale has matured as a market. And so it's not a place where you're going and visiting your parents or grandparents. It's a place where young people want to live because of the excitement that's happening. So I think that's just a testament to the market maturing and growing. But yeah, right now I think you're seeing a trend in rentals throughout the country. Home ownership rates have come down. Part of it's millennial lifestyle choices. Part of it's empty nesters. We're building this project, 629 residences south of the river, targeting that empty nester demographic. So someone who can afford to be in a condo, but wants the flexibility of renting. They want fully serviced, managed building with all the amenities, but they don't want to be tied down. So I think it's just preferences from a lot of demographics are shifting towards rental. And maybe that's the hangover from the recession and the housing crisis, where no longer is it guaranteed that housing prices go up. But there's also, these buildings are just like condos, and you're getting amazing amenities and you're getting amazing service without having to put down the big down payment and everything. So I think it's a little bit of a trend throughout the nation.
And you nailed it on the head with the fact that Fort Lauderdale is evolving to a full-time home work life balance versus just coming in the party and then leave it back to their homes or whatever it is. Yeah. How do you think the rest of the world sees Fort Lauderdale?
So we're still dealing with a little bit of the spring break stigma. So many people around the world came here that and remember it that way. So we're still getting through that. We need to get those people back and to see that we have a Ritz-Carlton and a Four Seasons and the Gale and other things coming to market. Bright Line now, you have that connectivity. Sure. There's no question, those that are in the yachting world know that it's the yachting capital of the world. And so we've got all the waterfront homes, so you have all the big, a lot of people with big boats and that come, but it's still a laid back environment, which is nice, so you'll be down at the Elbow Room and you'll bump into, I'll bump into somebody that used to work for us at the Merrimac, and then you'll bump into a guy who's a billionaire, and they're dressed the same and you don't know the difference. And that's the beauty of Fort Lauderdale, is that you can blend in. It's still got that boating laid back culture, but it's also matured a lot in terms of the luxury options. And so I think that's the part where we still want people to realize, and they're starting to, because if you think about the 80s, right, that person that was coming here, they're 20 years old, well now they're 50, right? And so 30 years later, 35 years later, and so all of a sudden that guy's got real money, and he might want to come down here and go to the Elbow Room and have a couple drinks, and go to Blondie's and relive his glory days. But he doesn't want to go back to the Merrimac. He wants to go to the Four Seasons, right? And so that person has matured, so has this market. So I think quickly that story is being told. There's been a lot of global press. The other thing is our airport. It just continues to expand. And so we have additional connectivity internationally, not just domestically, but internationally. So I have friends in Brazil who used to come, and of course we go to Miami every year. And the CFO of his company, when I was in Brazil visiting last year, told me that his family started flying to Fort Lauderdale now because there's a direct on Azul. Yeah. And so now they come to Fort Lauderdale as their annual vacation, and they go down and they spend a couple days in Miami. So Miami's the side trip versus Fort Lauderdale.
Interesting.
So again, it's just that's just because the preferences have changed, but it's also that the market's matured and we have hotel options, we have restaurant options that appeal to that more.
And now residential options like the Four Seasons, as you've mentioned.
Yeah.
Albert's a little further
Albert's
north,
fantastic. Yeah, related crushed it there. They did great there. Before that, my brother did Paramount, and then we sold out there, and we obviously did the Gale. So it's got a variety of options, and yeah, it's changing. But stigmas take a little while to get over, and so we welcome you to come visit and check out what we got going on.
Now, if you were to put one thing as your favorite about Fort Lauderdale, what would it be?
The favorite is just the ease of living here. Like I said, yeah, I mean, everything, it can be 5 or 10 minutes away.
Right.
And so when you're in a rush, or for me, I'm running around from project to project. We have 10 developments going on in different phases. So I'm in the car a lot running around. I can manage that lifestyle here. I can also, get down the street on Las Olas and, go out and just meet all my friends easily, get to the beach easily. So, and if I travel a lot, so ease of getting in and out of the airport is also a huge plus. So first and foremost, I'd say that's it, just convenience.
Now, this one question I'm going to ask you next, I didn't give you the answer. I told you what it was, but I didn't give you what the answers were. I've asked this about Miami to your brother, to every developer I've interviewed down in Miami, but I've never asked it about Fort Lauderdale, so I'm really curious to hear your answer. If you were to give Fort Lauderdale an age, because when you look at New York or Chicago or LA, those cities are really old and mature, what age would you give Fort, if it was a human being, what age would you give Fort Lauderdale?
Well, it's funny that you say that, because I'm actually going to the Historical Society tonight. I'm a board member, and we're celebrating Fort Lauderdale's birthday. And I think it's the 111th birthday, so officially. But I would really say, we're probably somewhere in our 40s.
Really?
Yeah. And I say that because, like anything, it was kind of a slow growth. The market developing over time. So while it's been around for 100 plus years, we really come into our own over the last 30 to 40 years. And that's because the city fathers at that time decided that we didn't want to be a town. We wanted to be the best mid-sized city in America. That was the moniker. And we won some awards to that effect.
Sure.
And so we didn't want to be a massive city. We didn't want the traffic and congestion. But we wanted the amenities of a real city. And so that's when they changed the zoning on the downtown, they changed the beach, and then you started to see the results of that now. So, and that's also kind of our target demographic, mid-40s, late 50s, somebody's got kids, maybe they're, going to age out soon, and they want to see themselves here as empty nesters, not completely gray hair, but, getting there, kind of like myself. And I'm 38. I'm a younger brother, for the record.
Another shot.
Yeah. So, but I have the gray hair because I get the harder deals. So that's what I tell them.
Because you're Fort Lauderdale, condo hotels, all that. Yeah. It's interesting. The answer that most people give about Miami is in their 30s.
Yeah.
Because it's still like they're just coming out of that party phase. They're kind of like a little bit more mature, but they still want to party. But that kind of really goes in line with what you're talking about, the vibe and the hustle of Miami versus the vibe and what the hustle is in Fort Lauderdale. Now, this weekend is the Air and Sea show. Yeah. I know we mentioned it a few times. How did you get involved in such a cool idea or concept? I love it. And I really want to know, did you ever go into one of those fighter jets? Because that's like my bucket list for sure.
Yeah. So how do we get involved? Earlier, like I said, it was here, it went away. Then the city really wanted to bring it back. A couple people tried. My mom had started some events on the beach, and nothing to this scale. And so we were encouraged to kind of pursue it, to help bring it along. And it was just a coincidence. A friend called me one day and said, "Hey, can you meet a friend of a friend? They want to meet you." It's my partner, Brian Lilly. He's doing a couple air shows in other markets. Said, "Hey, I want to bring it back. Here you're the person to talk to." By the end of dinner, we shook hands and said, "Let's do it." And when we brought the idea to my mom, this was in 2011, and he said, "Well, okay, we'll plan for 13. And she said, "We'll only do it if we're doing it next year." And he said, "We can't. It's too much, not enough time. I need all these forms filled out for the military and blah, to get the jet teams." She said, "Give me the forms." And 2 weeks later, she had everything signed, and said, "Okay, we're doing the show."
Who did she call?
City manager and mayor at the time. Mayor Seiler was there, and he was always a big supporter of it. Did it for 3 reasons. I mean, partially because, first and foremost for me, it helped the beach businesses.
Sure.
And during a lot of tough times, a lot of recessionary times, it was helpful to our family business to get through those tough times. So we wanted the businesses to survive. Wanted to support our military. Obviously, it's a big part of doing the show. And then finally, just kids, like growing up as a youngster, remembering it was just a cool thing. And so it's a real family event, and we made sure we brought it back to bring it back as a family event. I have not been in a fighter jet. I've been in a number of planes. Okay. There's a protocol for getting into the Thunderbird Blues. Yeah. But
maybe you could call your mom. She could get you out.
She would get the ride before me, and she would do it. So I'll tell you a funny story. The first year they asked us, they said, well, we had the Red Bull helicopter, which was the first helicopter to do it. The guy to do a backflip. His name is Chuck Aaron. And they said, do you want to go in the helicopter? And it was her birthday. I won't say which birthday. And so she said, well, I want to go. So, okay. So we jumped in and we started doing backflips and barrel
in the helicopter.
Yeah. And so that night I'm at an event at one of our parties, and we have the Red Bull guys in the wingsuits jump out of a plane and they fly into the party on the beach, and they come in. And so I'm talking to the wingsuit guy, and the helicopter pilot walks by and says, hey, did you have a good time? Did your mom have a good time? Yeah, thanks. And then I look back at the wingsuit guy, and he's white, and he goes, you went up there and you took your mom? I was like, yeah. And he's like, dude, that guy's crazy. And I said to him, I go, you just jumped out of a plane in a wingsuit. Yeah. And I said, and you're saying that guy's crazy? He goes, yeah, but I wasn't the first guy to try it.
Oh, got it.
So I didn't realize all that at the time, but that was probably the coolest air show experience. Yeah. He's now retired. There's a few other guys that do it.
So you made it out alive.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. We were doing barrel rolls, and so we've gone up in a few other planes. Okay. Some of the stunt planes over the Everglades, they just rip around. But I'm getting a little bit more cautious in my older age.
So my 41st birthday is now in a few weeks, in May 26th. And last year I said I was going to do it for my 40th. I wanted to skydive.
Oh, nice.
And I didn't do it. So I'm going to do it this year, and I have a 21-year-old son. He's going to do it with me. He's like, if you go, I'll go. So that's it. I've already committed. I'm committing on camera that we're going.
Nice.
Last question, man, and then I'll let you go on with your day. And I ask this to every interview I've done. Do you have a book, podcast, or TED Talk recommendation for the audience?
I would say from a book perspective, and it's a little generic, but this most recent book I read that I found interesting, $1 Billion Whale. Okay. It's about the whole 1MDB scandal. And it's just interesting because the players involved, $5 billion fraud, you had Goldman Sachs involved, you had all these players and all these celebrities around this thing, and you wonder how this day and age a fraud like that could happen on such a massive scale with all these institutional partners, and you realize, life's not as black and white as it seems, even at the at that level. So it's worth a read.
Okay. How about TED Talk? Do you watch podcasts or listen to podcasts?
I don't. I really don't. I don't get to them usually, and I don't do a lot of TED Talks. I'm usually out at the Milken Conference this week, and I hit a lot of panels there. And if you haven't been, the Milken Global Conference is awesome. You get all your TED Talks fixed in 1 week, and you're around the most amazing people in the world. It just coincided with the air show, so I couldn't make both happen this year. But I'd say The $1 Billion Whale is a cool book.
There you go. Episode number 51 in the books. Dev, thanks
man. Bring the kids to the air show.
I want to. It was awesome. This was great. You blew my expectations away, man. Thanks. I appreciate it. Any parting words for the audience before I turn it off?
No, my brother's great. I know I give him a hard time on these things, but he's awesome.
Awesome.